Hello, my friends. Welcome to Acquisitional Wealth, episode number 11. I am so glad you're here. My name is Josh Tully. I'll be your host for this amazing journey as we explore the ins and outs of acquisitional wealth, the fastest, most proven, safest way to create life-changing wealth in the history of the world. So before we get into today's topic, you should do a couple things. First, follow us on Facebook, Acquisitional Wealth, totally free. You don't need to pay to be a part of the page or the group or whatever. Just come on in and be part of the community. A lot of great discussions, networking, sharing war stories are in there. So definitely be a part of that. Also, subscribe to these podcasts. So if it's an audio version, subscribe. If it's the video version, like, share, subscribe, all that sort of stuff. And also let us know how you like these. So contact us. If this is your first time joining us, I would strongly recommend going back and listening to or watching episode number 1, and then just kind of binge watch the entire series because they kind of build on each other. So hope that makes sense. All right. So for today's topic is going to be talking about who's on your team. And I think this is a really important topic, especially after the last 2 episodes, because I see a lot of people either A, trying to do this alone, or B, doing it with a team that really just sucks and ends up costing them the deal or cost them a fortune. So let's kind of go through that. Let's start with, should you be your own team? No. I know there's books out there. I know there's trainers out there. There's experts that are telling people to just buy businesses on their own and don't worry about professional services, and you'll be fine. This is not like buying real estate. This is not like buying a house or a car or a watch. This is a very complex transaction. Even if you're buying something really, really simple, like laundromats, car washes, what have you, there can be a lot of complications and a lot of details involved in the transaction. And that if this is your first 1, 2, or 3 businesses, it's just not worth it. It's just not. I don't understand the desire. There's this idea, there's this one guy out there, I won't mention his name, but there's this one guy out there who's like, oh, don't use a business broker. 1, they don't have the best deals. They're only selling ones that are listed. 2, it might overcomplicate the process. Neither one of those things is true. Neither one of those things. When we have a buyer come to us, we don't go for listed businesses only. I don't know any quality brokers that do that. Maybe some of the larger sort of systems out there do, because they're just trying to run volume. But a really good broker, no, that's absolutely asinine. It's not true at all. So then it comes down to, well, you don't want to pay a fee or a finder's fee, referral fee, commission, whatever the broker calls it. Why not? Why not? That's typically my first clue as to somebody's not really going to be successful after the transaction. If you're trying to nickel and dime the transaction itself, I'm not going to place a bet that you're going to be successful. I'm just not. Because you're already thinking, how do I pinch every penny? How do I save every dollar? Nope, you should not be looking at how do you save money when it comes to creating wealth. You should be looking at how do you spend money. And I'm not saying spend it wastefully, quite the opposite. That's why you look at how do you spend it. But if you're working with a good team, your team of people are going to save you way more money and make you way more money than it'll ever cost you to have them, if that makes sense. Now, the other sort of entity or person that I'll throw in there before we get into who should be on the team is a spouse. I have seen over the past 27 years, 28 years, I have seen deal after deal, opportunity after opportunity, growth option after growth option get denied, lost, slipped through their fingers because of a spouse. We could do 5-6 episodes just on spouses in business. Try to be on the same page with your spouse before you even decide to look at buying a business. Really. If you're not going to be on the same page, don't do it. Don't do it until you get on the same page. And I know the question usually comes up then, well, Josh, what do we do to get on the same page? Well, come to our events, read books on the subject, watch videos, look at the news and see how everybody is doing this. You know, that's one of the common ones. Well, if everybody's doing this, why haven't I heard about it? Everybody is doing this. Just people in your income group aren't, but everybody else is. But you know, kind of get them involved until hopefully they see the light. But if they don't upset your marriage for the pursuit of wealth. It's not worth it. It's just not. And I've seen so many deals just go bad or not happen because the spouse wasn't on board. So there's that. Okay, so now let's kind of dig deeper. Who should really be on the team? What are you looking for? Entity number one is your broker. We are going to do an entire episode on good brokers versus bad brokers and what you should look for. So we'll kind of shelf that largely for a minute and just say a good quality broker. Okay, but let's get beyond that. You should also want a transaction attorney. And this is really, really important. A transaction attorney is someone who has experience with M&A transactions, because at the end of the day, that's what you're doing. You're acquiring a company. And where a lot of people go wrong with this is they'll tend to choose a lawyer that is a friend of theirs, that might have handled their divorce, that handles their current business, for whatever little entrepreneurial thing they're doing now. And all of those are terrible decisions. 9 out of 9 times, terrible, terrible, terrible decisions. And the reason is quite simple. Business transactions, like an M&A sort of acquisition sort of deal, is not like a divorce. It's not like writing up a simple employment agreement or a simple contract or anything like that. It's just not. You're going to want somebody who's really, really experienced in M&A transactions for a number of reasons. And you're going to want to avoid lawyers that aren't as experienced. Now, here's where it gets a little tricky. Most business lawyers are going to tell you that, oh yeah, we do that. No, probably not. Just probably not. There are hundreds of thousands of lawyers, probably more than that, but hundreds of thousands of lawyers. The majority of them will tell you, oh yes, we can handle that because we're business attorneys. And they probably haven't done one in the past 2 years, 3 years, 4 years. Let me put it this way. There are way more business lawyers than there are deals done every year. So let's say there's 20,000 M&A transactions that happened last year, and that's probably a little high. But let's say there's 20,000 deals that happened last year, and there's 400,000 business lawyers that can handle transactions. And you call them up and you're like, hey, do you handle transactions? And they're like, yes, we do. Have they though? Probably not. And did that particular lawyer do one, or did a lawyer in the firm do one, 2 years ago, and it was a laundromat for his Aunt Mary? And I'm not insulting anybody because that's not a real case, but you get the point, right? That a lot of these transaction attorneys are terrible. And when you get a bad transaction attorney, it can literally cost you the deal. At max, well, not at max. At max, you could end up in legal trouble. But most of the time, the worst case scenario is it costs you a deal. But even other sort of damage along the way can be time spent on wrong documents. We have had that time and time again, where we have dealt with one side or the other having a bad attorney, and they keep messing up documents, and it costs the client a ton of money because lawyers bill by the hour, even if they make the mistake, or the other side makes a mistake and your side has to respond to their mistake. And 2, just bad craftsmanship of that document. It can be a little bit worse, though, also. We've had deals where the buying attorney is sending a document to the selling party's attorney. The selling party's attorney okays it, and then the other attorney sends a different version of that to the client of the lawyer. Obviously unethical, probably illegal. I'm not a lawyer, but probably illegal, and extremely dangerous. So just be really, really careful. The worst case scenario that I've personally been involved in, other than the fact a number of attorneys don't understand the terms, the process, that's very, very common. It's very common. I've been in, just this year alone, I've been on probably 4 or 5 phone calls where we had to explain to the lawyers how a business transaction works. And one lawyer, we had to tell him what indemnification is, which once you realize what it is, you're like, well, shouldn't they learn that at like first day of law school? You would think. So you have to be really careful. But one of the worst cases I had was a client. I was selling his business for 8 figures, so pretty big number. And the lawyer he went with, against my recommendation, was a business lawyer. And he called himself like the deal expert or something. Like even on his website, it was really, really red flag cheesy, right? And the guy cost the deal. Like he literally lost the deal. And I spent hours and hours with multiple phones in front of me trying to reconstruct that deal. Luckily, I got it done. And I'm not saying that to brag. It had nothing to do with me. I'm trying to point out how bad the lawyer was. But we were able to fix it. But that lawyer just thought, oh, well, because I know transaction law, I know deals. No, you don't. It's irrelevant. Which leads me to a really big important point. Your lawyer is not there to negotiate the deal. Your lawyer is there to put the deal that you negotiate with your broker, if you're using one, on paper and make it structurally sound according to the law. That's what they're there for. Now, things they will negotiate would be, time to get the reps and warranties finished, or, how long will the schedule take for assets or whatever. Like they'll have some negotiating with the other side's attorney on that stuff. But the structure of the deal itself, who gets what for what, they shouldn't have anything to do with. And it's actually a massive, massive red flag if they start poking their nose in there. Just know that. And the other person on your team is going to be your transaction accountant. Again, just like with a lawyer, we're not talking about the lawyer you have now. We're not talking about probably the accountant you have now. You're going to want to have an accountant that can do transaction due diligence. That's going to be extremely important when it comes to what they see in those financials, any sort of leaks that the other side is trying to cover up, any sort of red flags, and to be honest, any sort of opportunities too that might be there that you're just not seeing. So get with a good transaction accountant. And here's kind of, I guess, a word of advice from a friend. I get that a lot of you have lawyer friends and accountant friends. And there's this just loyalty that you might have, and it's very admirable. Yay, well done you. But don't go there with your transaction. You're talking about something here that could mean millions of dollars for you and your family for generations to come. Done right, when you and your lawyer are both dead, the deal you're putting together will be taking care of your grandchildren or a charity you decide to support or whatever. But you get the point. It's bigger than just you. So even though the lawyer you have for your small business who drafted your employment agreement says they can do it and you like the guy or the gal, irrelevant. Tell them, hey, you know what, Sally? We're going to keep you as our business attorney, our in-house counsel, so to speak, on retainer. But for the transaction, we're going to go with an experienced transaction attorney. And a really good sign of a good lawyer is for them to say, totally understand, standing by and ready to assist once you make your purchase and you get the keys. So just kind of keep an eye out for that. I can't tell you how often people go with a bad lawyer or a bad accountant just because they have history with them. And even though you watch this, guarantee a large percentage of people who watch this are going to make that same mistake too. And then you're going to pay for it. And then you're going to be like, Josh, you were right. And told you. The next thing when it comes to this team is they should all be communicating well. All of your team members should know each other. Maybe not prior to the deal, like you don't have to go get a group of friends who do this, but they should be talking. Your broker, your accountant, your lawyer should all be talking. Between your broker, your accountant, your lawyer, and you and your spouse, that should pretty much make up the team. It just should. That should pretty much make up the team. And I get a lot of, well, Josh, a friend of mine owns a business and I want him to advise me. No, just no. And it happens a lot. But your business friend who owns a business is not a business person. And I know I stress this a lot, but it's absolutely true. They are not a business person. Owning a business doesn't make you wise when it comes to business. It just doesn't, which is why I don't even consider somebody, past beginner, past white belt, to use a karate analogy, until you've owned 3 separate businesses in unrelated industries. And because they're not schooled in this, they're not experienced in this. And they have a tendency to take their experience running their donut shop and somehow superimpose it onto a deal you're working, which right off the cuff should tell you that they're not good at this, because a good business person would never do that, if that makes sense. But I can't tell you the number of times where, we have a good deal going for everybody involved, and somebody talks to their business owner neighbor and they're like, well, they think I should pay less. They think I should, renegotiate the earnout. They think. Don't even let them in the door. Unless they're paying for it, don't listen to them. Everybody else has a vested interest. That's what I love about this industry. Your lawyer has a vested interest in this going well. Your accountant has a vested interest in this going well. Your broker certainly has a vested interest in this going well, and you have a vested interest in this going well. Your friend or your family member might love you. They might think you're, the bee's knees, but it's not their money. It's not their destiny. It's not their legal responsibility if it goes wrong. So don't listen to them. Matter of fact, I wouldn't even tell them. I'm serious. I wouldn't even tell anybody else I'm working on a deal until first. I wouldn't even mention it until after the LOI is submitted and accepted. And then I still wouldn't tell them the details. I'd just be like, hey, you know what? I'm about to buy a sports team or something. And then 2, I wouldn't tell them anything about the business itself in detail until after I have the keys. So just kind of keep that in mind. You have to protect your interests. And the only other people who do that and do it well are the ones who are engaged with you in that process. So just try to make a concerted effort to protect it. Now, the question comes down to, okay, well, if most accountants are not experienced with this, and way more lawyers are not experienced with this than are, how do you go about finding a good team? Well, it starts with that broker contact. A really good lawyer is going to tell you, use a broker. They're not going to try to be the broker for you. So a really good lawyer, if you start there, it's kind of like a triangle, wherever you want to start. If you start with the lawyer, they might be able to recommend a really good broker and a really good accountant. If you start with a really good accountant, they should be able to recommend a really good broker and a really good lawyer. And the same is true with the broker. They should have a Rolodex. And for those of you who are younger, it's like a contact list of lawyers and accountants that are experienced. And preferably somebody they've worked with before. I know for us at Kingsbridge, I really enjoy when a business buyer is humble enough to say, hey, you know what, who would you refer? Because there are lawyers and accountants that, one, we've worked with, which makes your deal flow so much smoother because everybody's done this before, right? It's kind of like a pilot crew that's flown together or an EMS crew that has responded to calls together. There's just a flow, right? They've worked with each other. But also, we can recommend different accountants and different lawyers for different types of transactions because it's not just transactions either. Like, let's say you're doing a transaction that involves the manufacturing of hazardous material. Well, if I have 20 experienced transaction lawyers in my contact list, I can look at that and say, well, 2 of them have experience with hazardous material law. Let's bring those in. So that way you're not kind of guessing and whacking away at this. Does that make sense? So that's kind of who should be on your team. Now, once in a while, you'll have somebody say, well, I already have a business coach or an executive coach or a business advisor. Should I bring them on board as part of my team? No. Nope. In 27 years, almost 28 years, I've never seen that go well, ever. Business coaches, even though they might have a great heart and they might be, wanting to do the right things, most of them do not have business experience, first and foremost. And second, even fewer of them have negotiated and been part of deals for other people in the past. I would say out of 400,000 business coaches, maybe 5, not 5,000, like maybe 5. So no. And again, it's one of those categories of people that I wouldn't even tell them what the deal is or what you're up to or whatever. Because more often than not, what happens is they'll try to insert themselves, right? So let's say you've had a business coach for 5 years and you meet every Tuesday to talk about whatever it is you talk about. And you say to this business coach, hey, you know what? I'm thinking about buying a bakery on 5th Street. Well, they're thinking, ooh, how can I get in on this? How can I be a part of this? How can I show off my expertise, earn more money, gain more trust? And they're going to try to interject. Wrong. Just absolutely terribly wrong. So just avoid it altogether. Don't talk about it. And then once you actually close the deal and get the keys, you can say, hey, I got good news for you. I added another business to my portfolio, and I would love to have your advice on how to increase sales or whatever it is you think that they're good at in your new business. So really, that's it. Your team should be small. Your team should be experienced in transactions. Your team should have your best interest at heart. And your team, in my opinion, should be able to offer you services beyond the close of the transaction as well. I think that's another huge and overlooked aspect to building the team. It shouldn't just be a wham, bam, thank you, ma'am. We ended the transaction and I'm out. I think there should be follow-up care if you want it. There should be guidance if you want it. There should be other services that you might need. You shouldn't have to buy a business and then go philandering all over the countryside trying to find other service providers for other elements of your business. So keep that in mind too. Now, whenever I bring up team, I will typically get asked the question about well, Josh, what about my board of advisory team? That's been hot over the internet the last several years where, how do you buy businesses? Well, 1, no money down. 2, use other people's money. 3, put together a board of advisors and, they're kind of like your leverage and all that other sort of crap. Typically not. Again, unless, there's a unique situation. I've not seen that go well, ever. And I know, I don't want to name names, but I know there's a whole following of people who think, that's what you got to do. And, start calling up experienced people and, put them on your website. And now you can say, well, these people are on my board. stop overthinking it. Just get rich first. Getting rich is so much faster and easier than that. By the time you put together a board, you could have already been rich and looking at business number 2. So a much easier path to do that. There are exceptions, of course. There's always exceptions to every rule. And sometimes those exceptions would be, instead of a board position, an officer position. And what do I mean by that in the few minutes we have remaining of today's broadcast? Let's say you're buying, I owned a clinic. Let's say you're buying a clinic. Obviously, I can't run the clinic. I can't provide any medical advice. I've never gone to med school. So I'm going to need an officer as a designated responsible party who is licensed, who, has all their credentials, has admittance permissions with local hospitals, all that sort of stuff in this case. Well, and then I might not want just one of those people, because what if that person gets hit by a bus or quits or whatever, or I fire them? I would have to shut down my business. So I might put together a small team of licensed people to take over the operation for a business that I'm about to buy, but I still wouldn't have them involved in the transaction of buying the business in the first place. Keep them in their roles, let them do what they do best, and you're the one that's becoming responsible for not only the financial side of this business, but also the legal ramifications of a business that's not ran well. It's not as cut and dry as a lot of these books want it to seem when it comes to buying a business. Oh, just buy a car wash. Nope. Are there time ordinances in your town? Well, I didn't even think to ask. Well, that would have been a big one. Do you have to, if it changed hands, do you have to install, high flow sewer systems? Oh, I didn't even think to ask. Well, that's my point. Stop doing this alone, people. Oh my gosh. But anyway, that's who should be on your team. I hope this episode helped. Definitely, if this is your first time joining us, go back to episode 1 and then just binge watch them or binge listen to them all. Remember to follow us on the Facebook page and group, Acquisitional Wealth. Subscribe, like, share, all that sort of stuff. And I will speak with you, see you in the next episode.